my name is Bryan Liles. I work at Thunderbolt Labs, and today I'm doing a talk on ActiveSupport and ActiveModel. And just to give you a little bit of a forewarning, this is an introduction. I mean, if you know a lot about Rails, this might be kind of a review, but we all could use a review. So with that being said, what's the first thing you do whenever you want to build a Rails app? What's your first Rails app ever? Well, of course, it should be a blog. So today, we're going to build a blog. And because I don't believe in typing live, because I don't have that much talent, I've created a whole bunch of screencasts. And I wanted to show you that everything that I'm doing today is possible because it's all live code. So what I've done here is I'm creating a blog application using Rails 3.2. And it's going by really fast, but what I'm using is Rails Bootstrap, which if you buy Michael Hartle's course or look at Michael Hartle's course, he actually does use Rails Bootstrap. And the reason we use Bootstrap is because I'm a developer and not a designer. And I wanted something that at least looked presentable to put on screen for you guys. So now I'm generating a post. And because we have blog's pretty much built up a post, so we need a post model. And I'm using a scaffold. You can or cannot use a scaffold. That's up to you. I'm using it only for demonstration purposes. And now what I'm doing is configuring Bootstrap to actually style my post. And now what I'm doing is an application helper, just a little bit more Bootstrap configuration. And the reason I'm doing this is for two purposes. For my display purposes today, but after I finish this talk, I used to do a lot of screencasting, and I'll put this up on my website, and I'll give you guys the access to that or address of that or where that'll be. And you'll be able to go back and at least look at these videos and say, hey, this is what this guy did. So after all that typing, here we are. I have a blog. And guess what? Thanks for coming, you guys. This has been really, really fun. This is 1 minute and 30 seconds. This is a new record, even shorter than my Ignite talk yesterday. But moving on, there's an interesting thing about Rails. People get started in Rails, and they're like, well, I did models, I did views, I did controllers, I did helpers. And guess what? I really know Rails. But when I asked them, well, do you really know Rails? If I gave everyone here flour, sugar, and water, and maybe some other stuff to go in a cake, would everybody build a beautiful cake? Probably not. So we have to think like chefs. Chefs can take flour, water, and whatever else goes in cakes. I don't cook. But whatever else goes in cakes, and they build beautiful stuff. So we need to know our tools. So that being said, I'm going to introduce ActiveSupport. ActiveSupport basically makes Ruby better. The cool thing about it is there is a lot of ActiveSupport and ActiveModel that makes Ruby better. And this right here is one of those little cool word jumble things. And this is all the names of the files and directories that are under the ActiveSupport and ActiveModel directories in your Rails source. I expect no one in here to know that. I'm just showing you that there is a lot. And I'm also showing you that it's 2 minutes and 40 seconds into this talk. And there's no way I'm going to go over all this. But I'll pick the good ones. So back to our talk. So in Ruby, who here doesn't know Ruby? This is great. This is the worst slide. Everybody knows what an attribute accessor is. And you know what? That's kind of boring. But let me tell you what ActiveSupport does. ActiveSupport makes Ruby better. ActiveSupport gives you something, a C-adder accessor. And the C-adder accessor actually gives you easy class-level accessors. Everyone in here could write this, and I could probably tell you 3 different ways to write this now, but why write it whenever ActiveSupport gives you this? And not only do they give you a C-adder accessor, they also give you an M-adder accessor for use in modules. And then you also get an add accessor with defaults. And once again, these are hidden gems that are inside of ActiveSupport. So back to the whole thing is that ActiveSupport makes Ruby better. One of my most favorite things about ActiveSupport, and this is real big when Rails was in its infancy back in 2006 and 2005, was the Rails inflector. What Rails can do now is take strings, and I'll go through all these examples. So the first one, it's actually taking the string module and it's constantizing that. What it's actually doing is saying, hey, what if I wanted to programmatically create code? So ActiveSupport is taking this string module and turning it into a constant name module. Don't ever name your constants modules. That would be bad. Another second case is Camelize. I'll wait. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So no, snake case. You camelize it. We convert it from snake or underscore case or whatever you want to call it, and we convert it to camel case. And the same thing with pluralize and singularize. This stuff seems very simple, but it's easy, and it's given to you for free. And the cool thing is that with Rails, like words like cow, what's the plural of cow? Does anyone know in this room?
Cattle.
No, it's not. It is kine, K-I-N-E. You can look it up in a dictionary or on Google. But Rails knows these things, and things like oxes. There's no such thing as oxes, there's oxen, and there's no such thing, and some words have no plural. And you know what? ActiveSupport knows this thing, and in Rails, you can actually configure it, and when you generate your app, you can actually say that, hey, I know better than Rails, and you can actually configure it to make it the plurals work right. But like I'm saying, ActiveSupport makes Ruby better. But we're not really talking about this. We're building a blog. So since we're building a blog, let's have another segue. One thing that someone will never tell you is, someone will tell you is that you will spend a lot of time in your Rails console. You will type Rails space C or Rails space console an awful lot. I live in my console. And if I'm going to live in my console, it should be nice. I mean, I live in a nice house. I don't live in a crappy house. So what is pry? Basically, pry replaces IRB. And that's actually a very big thing. And I'm going to actually show you how pry works. And the reason I'm showing you this is because when I was explaining to my wife this talk, she's like, what's this IRB thing? So I was like, all right, let me put pry in. And then she's like, well, what's pry? She doesn't do Ruby. Or development, for that matter. So let's talk about pry. So we're going to add pry to our gem file. And I put it in a group development. And we're just going to go gem pry-rails. And hey, another movie. So what I'm doing here is, since I have pry in there, I just type Rails C, and instead of having a console, now we have a pry console. And the cool thing is here is that look what I did. I actually CD'd into string, and I did ls, and that shows all the methods inside of string. This is cool stuff here. And now I'm doing show method, and I don't remember what method I did. So show method string hash humanize. And look at this. It's actually showing the source of that method. This right here will probably be one of the most instrumental tools that you can find in Ruby for the console. Another cool thing that you can do is you can also see documentation for anything. So you're in your console. So I did a question mark, string camelize, and it showed me the documentation. Now here is the best part. Notice I just typed edit back there. Let me go back. I just learned how to do this, so I'm gonna go back. I learned how to go backwards in my videos, so I'm gonna do it. Notice I typed edit, and it launched my editor. And when there it goes, launch my editor. And I'm actually typing code here. I'm actually typing a new class because everybody needs a class named foo with a method named bar that puts a string called hello world, because that's how I do hello world. And you notice I close my editor, and now look, it's inside of my console. I don't have to type complex code inside of my console. And here I am editing a file. This right here is a typo, and because these screencasts take an awful lot of time to create, I saw this after I did it, and I just went back. There's no dot. There you go. So now I actually editing a file that's in my Rails app. And notice that after I change this file inside of my Rails app, and I'm going to add a new method because everybody needs a new method. Another bar. Yes. So I'm not very good at Sublime Text yet, so you'll see some little things here. But notice, the new method was in there. So that's pry. Everybody needs a little pry in their life. And the reason I'm introducing this is because I use pry, and I want everybody to see that edit and edit method and things like that aren't inside of Rails proper, and there actually are as another gem. So pry, and then pry-rails, and pry.github.com. So back to our real talk is benchmarks. So ActiveSupport creates something called benchmarks. Ruby standard library has a benchmark library, but ActiveSupport's is even easier. So let's see how we use it. So another disclaimer, I actually did these videos out of order, and there's just another way to do pry, but don't do it this way. And the reason why is because pry-rails actually allows you to get past typing in what I'm typing here. So I just told pry to include my environment, which is almost the same thing, but if you do pry-rails, you don't have to do this. So on to my example for benchmarks. So we have a special operation, and we want to know how long something takes to run. You see this all the time inside of Rails. And you'll notice that almost all of your Rails instances have a method called logger on there, so I'm just creating one for the purposes of this demo, and it's just going to log the standard out. So I'm saying perform this method, and I'm going to benchmark some long-running process. And what this long-running process is going to do is just sleep for 2 seconds, because that's a long-running process. And now, when I run this inside of my console and I run special operation and I initialize that and I run perform, it actually did take 2 seconds. I sped the video up. But notice it says long-running process, and then it gives you a time. So 2 milliseconds, or it would take 2 seconds and then 8 milliseconds of preprocessing. This is very good. This is easy way to benchmark code. And I'll tell you what, like I said, this is how it works. Basically, you include ActiveSupport benchmarkable if you're not inside of Rails. And you do benchmark long-running process, and then you do that, and then you get this for free to wherever your logger is going. And you're saying, Bryan, why are you showing this? Well, I'll tell you why I'm showing this. Because you see this all the time in your Rails logs. Every single one of these asset lines, and every time you go to a controller, and all you see these 304 not modified, 0 milliseconds, this is Rails consuming ActiveSupport benchmark. Because really, Rails would not exist, and Rails could not exist in its form and be easy to use if you did not have the benchmarking. So I keep on saying that we're going to get back to this blog, but we're 22 slides in, and we haven't even talked about this blog yet. So what does our app do? I don't know if Greg showed you this in the Rails for Zombies, because I've never actually done that. But all I'm showing you is that, hey, I actually do have a blog that I can create posts. And you notice I hadn't typed much code in. I just used the scaffolds. And it looks pretty. It's just Twitter Bootstrap, right out the box. I did absolutely nothing. I didn't even change the sidebar links. They don't link to anything. And I didn't get rid of the copyright at the bottom. So you get this for free. And you should use it if you want a decent-looking app without any work. And like I said, Michael Hartle's Rails tutorial definitely goes over this in much more detail than I have time for right now. So moving on, another cool thing I like about ActiveSupport is its support for callbacks. Callbacks are basically I do something, and before I do that something, or I want to do something like save, and before I do that, before I save, maybe I want to have some other special validation, or I want to do this, or I want to check for this, or I have after callbacks. So after I do something, or when I call this method after it, I want to have something else happen. And there's also a one for around, so you can do something on the beginning and the end of a callback. So let me show you how this works in code. See where we are here. So I'm creating a new file here, and I'm creating a file called share, because with my posts, whenever I share them, I want to share them. I want the ability to share posts. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a class here for sharing. And I'm creating a callback for announce share. So we're going to announce our share after we've shared it. And inside of my announce share method, I'm going to set up my callback saying run the callback for announce share, and I'm just going to log to the. I'm just going to make a log that says the post was shared. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a subclass of that called web share. And web share is just going to share my post to the web. So I create a post, and let's say I want to share it to Hacker News, because everybody creates posts and wants to share them to Hacker News. So after I create my post, I'm going to say send to remote service, which is Hacker News. And this is how you would send things to Hacker News. You would just put it in your log. And you set the callback to announce share. And notice that because I inherited from share before, I could do that. And saying after I announce the share, I'm going to send to remote service. So let's run this inside of our console. And I'm using screen here, so you can see you have a log here, and then you have a console up top. So I'm creating a new web share instance, and I'm saying announce share. But it should be web share. There you go, Bryan. So now you have announce share, and I'm just do it again because that's going to show up in logs. So post will share, sending to remote service. So that's a callback. I just said after I do announce share, I want to send it to the web service. And the cool thing about this is that this is all over. And here's a slide that summarizes what I just did here. So we define the callback, and then in a method below, we have run callbacks, my callback, and do some stuff. And then to use that callback, you just have to do set the callback, and then before, and this is a before filter, or before callback in that case, before I run the callback, I'm going to run the before code. So whenever the output of this will be before code ran, and then my callback ran. And just to go back to that, my callback ran was defined here. But another cool thing about this is I want to show you all of this in context. And just to let you know, Rails uses this all the time as well. And the way Rails uses this is with saving in active record. So what I've done here is I'm creating a method called share with the web, and I'm making it private because I don't want anyone else to call this. And I'm basically typing the same code that we did before, but I'm going to create an after save, which is a special, inside of active record. Active record sets up all the callbacks for you. So whenever I save my post, so I'm creating a post and it will be saved, notice that inside the log, post was shared and sent to remote service, the remote web service. So that's how ActiveSupport or active record callbacks work. But the cool thing is that you can use these callbacks in your own code for anything else. And everything that I've showed you so far, I'm showing you in a Rails context. There's no reason why you couldn't do this in your non-Ruby projects. Go ahead.
Are those callbacks blocking, or are they spawned off and not blocking?
No, they are blocking. It's all synchronous.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just way out of the scope of this talk. But yes, there are ways to run things asynchronously. I mean, there's whole packages and gems that allow you to run things asynchronously. Like, look at Redis and Rescue if you really want to look at something like that. That's RESQUE, because why would you spell anything right in Ruby? All right. So a little summary about ActiveSupport, and what my goal here is to show you things in context. It's more of, you can go read a book about Ruby, and I read a whole bunch about books about Ruby when I started, and I was like, well, it doesn't make any sense until I use it. So in anger, I learned all this stuff. So, and I'm trying to show you how this goes without you guys having to be so angry. You guys can learn through my anger. So ActiveSupport gives you a better Ruby. It gives you benchmarks. It has callbacks, and it has a whole bunch of extra stuff. So this post does have, or this talk does have ActiveModel in it. And we haven't talked about ActiveModel at all. And what I'm going to show you with ActiveModel, well, I'll get to that in a second. So what about ActiveModel? So what ActiveModel is to make a long story short, and this is actually in the ActiveModel source, is it's a known set of interfaces for usage and model classes. That really makes no sense. Then it goes on, it says, allows for integration with action pack helpers. Now it's starting to make more sense. And to explain this simply is, ActiveModel will allow you to create your own Ruby classes that act like active record in your views. And I know you guys went over views this morning, so whenever you're doing like Form 4 and things like that, ActiveModel will allow you to create your own type of objects that could be backed by flat files, that could be backed by MongoDB, SQL. They could actually come from some REST service. But ActiveModel basically gives you the set of rules that allow things to act like active record. And before Rails 3, ActiveModel, or the concept of ActiveModel, were buried inside of active record, but the core team decided to split them out so people could actually use their NoSQL databases and things like that. And all the NoSQL databases you see, like Mongoid and SQL, that's SEQUEL, they all have ActiveModel interfaces, so you can use them just like active record. And I was talking about Action Pack earlier, and I was talking about my Form 4. So this Form 4 post, do whatever, you assume that post, the instance variable post, is active record. But it doesn't have to be. It can just be something that adheres to the ActiveModel interface. So let's look at that. So what does it mean to be ActiveModel compliant? Well, there's a couple things. I won't go through all of them, but it needs to have errors that respond to some kind of array, and it needs to respond to some key. It needs to have a model name. You're like, wow, that's a lot of rules. There's like 8 of them. So what's the easiest way to do this? Well, the first thing you do is you write the test. And what the Rails core team gave us is a way to say, I want something to act like ActiveModel, and we gave you a set of lint tests that'll actually allow you to make sure that it works this way. And the reason I'm explaining it to you this way is it's easier, instead of giving you a class with 20 lines in it, it'd be easier to show you why those lines exist. So another screen test. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to create a test, because we all should always create our tests first. You're going to hear this a lot in the Ruby world, and you're going to hear me saying it a lot. We write our tests first, always. And we write a test first so we know what we're going to be creating. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a flat file post, because I'm saying, well, you know, my blog is not going to be very popular, so I'm just going to store all my blog posts in a flat file. Why not? Sounds like a good idea. So I'm writing this file, and I'm using ActiveSupport test case, and I included ActiveModel lint test. And what I did is I saved and I created an instance of flat file post, and I just named it model. And you need to do this for ActiveSupport lint. I'm talking about ActiveModel lint test. And now what I did is I ran the test. And of course, when I ran the test, all of them failed. So they failed because the flat file post does not exist. So let's create this flat file post in my model folder or directory. And now the error messages have changed. And now what they all said is the messages changed that I didn't have a method called toModel. And now I'm running it one more time, and now we get down to the real 8 failures. So now it's actually telling you what you need to have to make something ActiveModel compliant. And the reason I'm explaining to you this way is because ActiveModel and all these things seem complex, but whenever you boil them down to, it needs to respond to 2 valid, 2 partial path, 2 valid, errors. Hold on. Valid, persisted, 2 partial path, 2 param, 2 key, persisted. I mean, these are things that you can easily solve because you'll know that you're solving them correctly because the test will pass. So let's go ahead and do this real quick in another screencast. And this actually goes really quickly. So I extend ActiveModel naming because it actually gives me some of the things to make these tests pass. It makes one of them tests go away, or one of the failures go away. And now I'm creating an errors, and I'm actually saying that my flat file post model has 3 columns, ID, title, and post. And I'm initializing the errors. And what I'm trying to do is reduce the number of errors each time. So I'm going to create a 2 key, a 2 param, a 2 partial post, a 2 partial path, and then I'm going to run a test again. And then I'm going to add a def persisted, and then I'm going to add a valid. And I have another typo here. So I'm all the way down to 1 test, and I just need to make sure that 2 param, it's a typo, but I need to make sure 2 param actually just turns false. So now, there we go. It was backwards. So now I have an ActiveModel compliant, compliant object. So that was a lot of work. I know it was a lot of work, and I showed you that on purpose because what I'm showing you now is that the future in Rails 4, which we should hear about hopefully tomorrow or Wednesday, makes this extremely easy. You saw all the stuff that I typed before. In Rails 4, you'll be able to include an ActiveModel model, and then just say what your accessors are, and all those tests will pass. So ActiveModel makes it easier to work with Action Pack, and then it has hooks to make connecting your data sources simpler, and it does a whole bunch of other stuff. But you're going to see that you might think that I kind of gloss over ActiveModel. What I'm trying to do now is just increase your. You're not going to hear a lot of ActiveModel talks in beginning Rails. But I want you to understand that whenever you install Rails, or if you go to GitHub and go to GitHub/Rails/Rails, there's a whole bunch of directories there. If you're going to be coding in Rails, just take a look through and look at the source, because in all the source files, there's lots of good documentation that shows you exactly how to use it. And the people will create more robust solutions whenever, instead of reinventing the wheel, they use all this great stuff that's already included. So I always want to show active models to show people that it's there and that it's there for your usage. So back to ActiveSupport. And just a good thing to know, I have 7 minutes and 18 more slides, so we're going to do this. So ActiveSupport concern. This is a new feature that came in Rails 3. And the reason this came in Rails 3 is YehudiCat said, this is how you used to have to, so if you had a cool little, like a post, and in Rails back in the day, we had all these acts as something methods, and acts as this, acts as this. So to make all that work, you basically had to go through and open up your class, and then you had to do the self-included and tell it to extend the class methods and include the instance methods. And this actually ended up being a lot of typing. So what ActiveSupport does, because it makes Ruby better, now look what you can do. You can tell your new module to extend ActiveSupport concern, and then you can just have a module called class methods and put all your instance methods at the instance method level. And I don't know if Greg mentioned this, but I'm sure you guys heard of convention over configuration. If you follow this convention right here, you do not have to do all this configuration. And I didn't even type much. There's absolutely no code in this, but look how much shorter this is, how much more concise this is, and it's actually readable. So moving on. Another cool topic, and this is active support instrumentation. There's actually a talk about this tomorrow at 2:30. I will not go into this heavily because this guy's actually made a whole 45-minute talk on what this next 2 slides are about. So with instrumentation inside of Rails, what you can do is you can say that I want to instrument something. In this case, I want to instrument render. And I just want to I want to have this extra information, which is really nothing. And then I'm going to render this text. And then what I can do is have something subscribe, which is right here. I can have something subscribe to that event called render. And whenever I subscribe to it, it'll run whatever in the block. And in this case, all I'm going to do is store them into an array called events. And the cool thing is that inside of this, you can get events, and you can get name, duration, and payload. Why is this interesting? If you guys have heard of New Relic, New Relic actually does something similar inside of, actually I think they might even do this exact same thing inside of Rails 3, where they can actually see how fast is this running? 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 Because as you see, when you start getting Rails apps in production and they start getting some traction, what's going to happen is someone's going to hit your web app and something's going to be slow. It's great whenever you can instrument that, hey, I was in database, I spent this long in database, I spent this long rendering, I spent this long fetching a remote service, so you can actually tell what's slow. And just a reminder that this was only an introduction. So, not knowing how long this talk was going to be, I'm at 26 minutes, I said, well, why don't I just do some bonus slides? So, more active support. And I'm going back and forth because I don't want you guys to get complacent that I'm just going to talk about active support and ActiveModel. We're just going to talk about them both. So in active support, in old school, and before Rails 3, you could require active support in your non-Rails apps. And when you did that, you got a plethora. Like, remember all that word jumble thing? You got all that. And you didn't want all that. That made your runtimes real big. Inside of Rails 3, you can require any of these, a la carte. So if you only want callbacks, or you want concerns or configurables and inflector, I didn't talk about configurable, but if you want inflector, and that's all you want in your app, you want to be able to singularize and pluralize, you can just require that in, and then you have that ability. And real quick, configurable, if you look inside of your config directory, and you look inside of your application.rb, and you see that .config, that's an instance of configurable, just to let you know. So, once again, let's move back to ActiveModel. ActiveModel has a way to do conversions. And what it does is it basically gives you a free 2-model, 2-key, 2-param, and 2-partial path. Notice I typed them in earlier. With conversion, it says, well, if you're not changing them from default, here, you can just use this. Another cool thing is validations. You saw validations earlier, I'm sure, whenever you were validating your models. This is how this works. Active Record actually uses ActiveModel validation, and I'll show you, like the validates presence of, validates length of. You could actually have this for any non-active record backed persistence. It doesn't have to be an ORM, it doesn't have to be anything. You could just use this. And look at this. In this, I guess, eight line class, that's all you would need. And if you called valid on this and title was empty, it would actually give you an error, or return false, and then errors would be something. So another cool thing, serialization. I'm actually going to go through this one real quick. Is basically you include ActiveModel serialization, and what you can do then is you can actually say that if when I serialize it, I want to serialize this attribute, this title, and I get a serializable hash. It's like, Brian, why would I want to do that? Well, of course this is why you'd want to do this. You'd want to do this is so I want to convert my model, my non-active record-based model, to JSON. Or I want to convert it to XML, or I want to convert it to CSV, or columnar tab-separated flat files. I don't know what you want to do, but this is how you could do this. Very simply, built into ActiveModel, given to you free by Rails. So I'm on slide 60. This is me. I work at Thunderbolt Labs. One of the guys I work with in the back of the room, he's the other black guy in here, I think. Yeah, we've cornered the Black Rails market, and so this is me. Any questions about any of these slides? Any complaints about any of these slides? Send an email to here. And like Greg said earlier, yeah, I don't like to talk about myself before, so I made you sit through this, and now you can look at pictures of me. So thank you guys. You guys have been great. And